over the years, as I've kind of learned and things of that nature, the way I would recommend anybody approach any type of business opportunity is go all in.
Welcome to the Networking with Michelle podcast, the show dedicated on providing you the how-tos of marketing and networking strategies. Here we believe in the Jim Rohn quote, success is nothing more than a few simple disciplines practiced every day. All right, good people, we are back with today's special guest is Dr. Matt Motil, a real estate agent and investor who has worked with hundreds of investors from all over the world to help them grow massive wealth and passive income through real estate investments. Matt, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Good. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, real estate. Big two words.
Yeah.
Big two words. How did you get started?
When I was in college the first time, I was doing my mechanical engineering degree at the University of Toledo. Probably that's been about 15 years at this point since I graduated. But when I was a student, I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, the Robert Kiyosaki book. And it's interesting. It's kind of like a gateway drug for real estate investing. I think the majority of the people I've met over the years, when people ask them, well, how'd you get into real estate? They go, oh, I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It's not a real estate investing book, but, obviously the message in there was that Robert was able to basically create a lifestyle that he wanted to live and build the massive amount of wealth that he was able to create by leveraging real estate and the power of real estate. And so when I read that book as a college student, I was very ambitious, and to me that spoke to me, and I just started reading more, got more interested in it and that kind of thing, and just kind of fell in love with the idea of owning property, something tangible that you can touch and see and feel over, the concept of the stock market and owning paper and things of that nature. And so that was kind of where it started for me, and helped my parents. My parents owned a rental property when we were in college, and my brother and I actually lived there. And then we kind of helped move some of our other fraternity brothers into the house. Every semester we'd move people in, and my parents didn't live in town, and so I didn't know it at the time, but looking back on it later, I was like, oh man, I was a property manager. I was managing rental property. I didn't know it. I mowed the grass and I paid the bills and I collected rent and all that kind of stuff and made sure we were placing our friends in the house. But, that was kind of my first taste. From there, I had always kind of grown up. My dad was in construction. I ended up in construction for a long time. And so when I went to buy my first house to live in, I was like, well, I'm going to buy something that needs some work so I can put my stamp on it. I can make it my own. And also liked the idea of if I can, you make your money when you buy, right? So I thought, well, if I can buy something cheap and I can fix it up, then when I go to sell it later on someday, I'll have some equity in the property, I can make a profit. And so that was kind of how I got into doing it. And it was always kind of a side hustle for me because I had my job as an engineer working in the construction industry, but I was doing real estate kind of on the side. So I never, up until 2 years ago, I didn't have a real estate license. But I was basically doing what I would call live and flip. So I would buy a house, move into it, fix it up while I lived there, and then sell it a year or 2 years later for a profit, and then kind of roll the equity over and do the same thing. Did that pretty successfully until the market tanked in 2008, and I was in Phoenix at the time, and so that market was hit pretty hard. But you got to take the good with the bad, and I learned a ton from that experience of basically riding a market all the way up and then having it come down. And I think anytime you go through something like that, you have to appreciate the opportunity to learn a lesson from it. And being able to kind of look back on that and analyze that market. I mean, hopefully the next time we go through another housing bubble like that, I'll be in a position where I can see it coming, or at least be able to see it coming a little bit better. And then having lived the rise and the fall of it, be in a better position to come out of it, strong, because there were a ton of people that made a lot of money in that downturn, and especially investors. And so if you're in the right position at the right time with, the right resources, you can do really, really well in a good market and a bad market.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. What was the time frame? I understand you were in college, but what was the time frame that you started, I guess, the project management, live and flip, but before or up to 2008?
Okay. Well, I graduated with my engineering degree in the spring of 2002, and I bought my first house probably, I'd say, within 9 months of graduating from college. And so that was kind of the point where I started doing that. My first house I bought was in the St. Louis area, so it wasn't, was a cheap market. When I moved to Phoenix in 2003, it was still a very inexpensive market as well. I think the first house I bought in Phoenix was like 170 or 180, somewhere around there. So not anything that's insurmountable for somebody that's got a college degree and is making, a decent salary. Because back then, I mean, I think I was only making upper 40s, low 50s or something like that a year, which is, that's a reasonable income when you're thinking about, hey, I just got out of college, I'm making somewhere in that range. You can leverage a college education and a decent salary to get some buying power if you've got decent credit.
So you bought your first house in St. Louis on credit?
Yeah, I mean, I did it with FHA. That's the beautiful thing about, I recommend everybody uses if you're going to do something like this, like a live and flip type of scenario, and this is what I recommend to everybody I talk to these days, because I'm 37 now. I've got a bunch of kids, and we don't want to go live in a duplex or something. But what I always recommend when I talk to people that are coming out of school that are in their young to mid 20s that maybe are single or they're in a committed relationship, maybe they're married. What I always recommend to them is go use owner occupant financing to buy multifamily property. You can buy anywhere from 1 to 4 units with owner occupant financing. So you can get the same, an FHA loan is a 3.5% down product. So, for easy math, if you're buying a $100,000 property, you got to put $3,500 down. If you're going to rent something decent and you're going to put first month's rent and security deposit in the deal, you're pretty much going to be right there anyway. If you're going to rent something that's, in a more expensive market that you actually want to live in, you're probably going to be shelling out $2,000 to $3,000 anyway. So it's about the same cost to rent it as it is to buy. The beautiful thing is with multifamily is you can live in one unit and you can rent out the other unit in a duplex, or you can rent out the other 2 units in a triple. Or if you're buying a 4-unit apartment, you can rent out the other 3 units. Typically, the rent on one unit will be about the price of what you're going to spend for your mortgage. So for a young professional first starting out that wants to get into the real estate game, even if it's like a side thing, going multifamily as your first purchase using owner-occupant financing and using an FHA product allows you to put very little money down, and then your tenant in a duplex will pay your mortgage. And so in essence, you can live for free, which is really, I don't know anybody coming out of college that is coming out of college with no student loans. When those student loans start coming due, it gets painful in a hurry. And the good and the bad is they give you a 6-month grace period, right? So you get out of school, you start getting that paycheck, and you got a grip of cash, and you're like, yeah, life is good, and you're making it rain. And then the next thing you know, the student loan bill comes, and you're like, oh crap. And and the initial pay period, I think, is, I don't know if they default as a 10-year or a 20-year at this point, but either way, if you've got if you went to a school and you paid for it all yourself, and it gets more expensive when you start doing graduate degrees. But, like for me, for example, I got a doctorate, right? So I have a lot of student loans because I did 3 different degrees. And so my student loan payment, when it all, came out of the grace period and I was paying on all 3 loans, it was like, whoa, it was more expensive than probably any car you could imagine driving or leasing. And that makes a huge difference. And when you're on a salary or some kind of a fixed income, that's that's painful. So being able to eliminate your rent or your house payment every month, that's huge. When you're looking at, I make X dollars a paycheck, and here's what I bring home. If you can eliminate your house payment, whether that's $800, $900, $1,000 a month, that's a big deal.
Yeah, it really is. I just had that conversation yesterday. So going back to this process, okay, so we get our FHA loan or whatever we're going to do. Can you speak to how important it is to have either money saved up as well as cash flow, especially once again, going off of the live and flip where you're going to get a fixer upper,
right,
and hopefully get some equity and flip it, of course.
Yeah, you can do, a couple things. Obviously you could buy a multifamily that needs work and then do like a live and flip multifamily situation, or you could do a live and flip in a just a single family home. It doesn't really matter, but the thing is, and there's a couple things. One, if you're going to buy something that needs some work, you're going to have to put some money into it. So you're going to have to either have some cash set aside so that you can do the things that you want to do. Obviously, we call it sweat equity, goes a long way, right? If you're the one slinging the paintbrush or the hammer, so to speak, your labor in essence doesn't cost you anything, right? We can start to get into all the philosophical stuff about opportunity cost and things of that nature, but at the end of the day, your labor doesn't cost you anything. And so, on nights and weekends when you get home from your job, if you want to, put some paint on the wall, or you want to rip out some cabinets or cupboards or, whatever, you can do that and the labor doesn't cost anything. So you got to have the cost of the materials set aside. Or the other option that you can do is, if you're going the FHA route, is FHA has a program called a 203K loan. So it's like a 401k for like a, retirement plan, but this is a different part of the tax code. So 401k is the section of the tax code that pertains to retirements, right? So 203k is this one that pertains to basically it's renovation loans that are government sponsored or government insured. And so the way it works is you're still going to put 3% down or 3.5% down of the overall purchase price. But let's say, and there's a lot more details to it, so I don't want to, but basically what they're going to do is you're going to buy a fixer upper. You're going to have contractors come in and provide you a quote of what it's going to cost to basically make it what you want it to be. And then the lender will give you the money that you need to do the rehab. And then they will allow you to borrow all of that money for the purchase and for the renovation. And you only have to put the 3.5% down of the total. So if you were, for example, if you were going to do a $30,000 rehab, you're only going to spend about $1,000 out of pocket to do that and roll it into your loan. And then the contractors that have quoted it have to be 203K certified, but they're the ones that will actually do the work when you buy it, and that kind of thing. So it's a nice program out there. So at the end of the day, if this is something that you wanted to do, now I think you've got to stay there for at least a year. But yeah, so if you're going to use a 203K loan, I believe you've got to stay there for a certain period of time before you can basically sell it, or flip it. But the beautiful thing is, if you're going to buy, if you were to take these two strategies that we talked about so far, the multifamily purchase using owner-occupant financing and the live and flip concept, what you could do is you could buy, let's use a duplex as an example. You buy a duplex, it needs work. You get a 203K loan to do all of the renovations that you need to do. You move into one unit and you live there. And then you move a tenant in to the other unit and they start paying you rent. What happens is after 12 months, you can move out and go buy another property and then move a tenant into the unit that you were just living into, and you can do it all again. So what you do is you can only have one FHA product at a time unless you move like far, far away. So assuming you're still in the same town, what you do is after 12 months, you get a refinance on the original loan. So now you put it into a conventional mortgage. Um, now you don't have an FHA loan anymore. Now you can go get a new FHA loan, and you can claim the income from both units as rentals now. So you've got a mortgage on the duplex, so your debt's going to go up, but your income's going to go up more. So your debt to income ratio actually goes down. So because that's the thing that people always ask me is they go, well, how do I start buying multiple properties? Because now I've got this loan and it's going to make it more difficult to get a new loan because I've already got a mortgage. And what I tell them is, you're actually more credit worthy once you've got a performing rental than you were before because your income went up by a bigger margin than your debt did. So your debt to income ratio actually drops. And that's really, at the end of the day, your credit score and your debt to income ratio is really all the lenders look at when they're determining your credit worthiness to give you a loan.
So when it comes to real estate, we're just focusing on the investing aspect. Is there a certain time where you should consider, when do I form this as a business, an official business? Do I get an LLC or do I just, get one or two houses and see how it goes? What's your take on that?
Well, there's a couple different schools of thought, I guess, with this. One is, and this is kind of over the years as I've kind of learned and things of that nature, the way I would recommend anybody approach any type of business opportunity is go all in. If you kind of limp into something, think about relationships that you kind of don't go in, we always joke and it's like you go in half-assed, right? So like you got to go in all assed. But if you got one foot out the door in a relationship, it's never going to work because you're always looking at the exit. The same thing with a business. If you approach real estate investing as kind of and use me as a perfect example, if you look at it of how I did it for 10 years or so, it was really my side gig, and I did okay. And every time I would do something, it was lucrative, it was beneficial, and except for when the market tanked, but aside from that, we did pretty well. But I wasn't 100% focused on it, and but here's the thing. So to answer your question, I don't want to go on too much of a tangent. I do that, so let me stay on track. So to answer your question, should I get an LLC or not? It depends. The key is if you get an LLC but you don't run the LLC like a business, then you're really not taking advantage of all the asset protection that comes from the legal creation of the business entity to begin with. So when people tell you about rental properties and things of that nature, and they say, oh, you should do it in an LLC, the reason they're recommending doing that is because there's liability and asset protection that comes in the structuring of the business. So you've got the business here and you've got your personal stuff here, and they're completely separated. The idea is, let's say you've got, let's say in your personal checking account, you've got like $1 million liquid cash, right? That's foolish, but let's say you do. Now, a tenant falls down the stairs of your rental property and decides they're going to sue you, right? So if you've got everything under the umbrella of your personal, name, when the attorney sues you, everything's up for grabs. So they have access to your $1 million in the checking account. They've got access to your vacation home in, the Caribbean, whatever. Everything that's in your personal name is now up for grabs. So the idea of setting up an asset protection structure in an LLC is that the only thing available to them would be what's in the LLC, right? So if you own each individual property in its own LLC structure, they only could ever get what's in that LLC. Yeah. Now, here's the thing though, and this is where people make a mistake is I've got my LLC set up. The LLC owns the property, right? And now I need to go get groceries, and I'm running low a little bit on my personal checking account. So I use my debit card from my LLC's bank account, and I go buy groceries for the week at the grocery store. It seems not a big deal, but the problem is what you've done is you've crossed the line between the business and the personal account. It's super easy to do. the minute you've done that, what an attorney calls that is called piercing the veil. And so you've allowed this commingling of business and personal funds and assets. And if anything were to happen in the LLC structure, it basically, they have the ability to go right through that veil of protection, right? So if you're going to set up an LLC, you have to go all in with legitimately running it like a business. The only way you can take money out of the LLC is to either pay yourself an income or take what's called an owner distribution. But you have to do it in the right way so that, and again, I mean, we should preface that I'm not an attorney. So you should consult with one, in the state where you're going to do this kind of thing. But at the end of the day, you have to do it the right way. Otherwise, you lose that veil of protection. That being said, if you want to do it in your personal name, just go out and get a monster insurance policy. So for the most part, you usually can get an umbrella policy. I think for our business, we've got like a $3 million policy, and I think it costs us a couple $100 a year. So I mean, for $300 a year, we've got this $3 million umbrella that covers pretty much all kinds of stuff. We do hold our rentals in an LLC. We operate it completely like a business. That business doesn't actually pay us at all. So money that accumulates from like the difference between rents versus expenses, it just sits in an account, and we just use that to buy more rentals when we have enough money to do that. So we don't actually pull any money out. So it's completely ran like its own entity and structure. And then we've got the insurance policy on top of it as well, both for the business and for our personal.
How many properties do you own?
We own 20 at this point.
Okay. I've been getting your emails, so that's been cool.
Yeah.
I actually have a friend. She's from Cleveland, so I've been sending them to her.
Oh, okay.
And she's a real estate agent here in Houston. I'm curious, what's your take about Airbnb as well as buying a new property specifically for Airbnb?
Sure. If it's done the right way, it can be incredibly lucrative. Vacation rentals in general have the ability to, when you think about it, I mean, if a place is going to earn you $1,000 a month in rent, right? So you bought a rental, and let's say you bought a condo, and you can rent it for $1,000 a month to somebody who wants to live there. You might rent that thing for $100 a night as a vacation rental, like on an Airbnb, right? So if it was 100% occupied, at the end of the day, you got 30 days in a month times $100. You're looking at $3,000 versus $1,000. So just like trying to compare apples to apples, you go, well, shoot, this is amazing. If I buy something that's in an area that people would actually want to come and rent, then this makes total sense. The thing that you need to realize in vacation rentals is that you're never going to have 100% utilization. So you have to factor that in when you're considering what we call vacancy loss. So in rentals in general, you're going to evaluate them exactly the same way, whether you're going to have it as a monthly rental or you're going to have it as a short-term rental. The numbers of calculating income and expenses are exactly going to be the same. The only difference is the ratios are going to change. So, for example, in Cleveland, in a decent area, we don't do anything like when we help remote investors invest with us here, we don't do anything less than like an average grade neighborhood because it's not going to be safe. It's not going to perform. The numbers aren't going to work and that kind of thing. But that being said, we will factor in an 8% vacancy loss because that's what we know. We just understand the market well enough here to know, and every market's different. So what that assumes is that 8% of the year you're going to have a vacancy while one tenant moves out, and you're placing a new tenant, or you're fixing up the unit and doing that kind of thing. You're probably going to have a much higher vacancy in a vacation rental. We tell everybody that, to factor in a 75% to 80% occupancy on a short-term rental. And so, that's instead of being 8% vacancy loss, you're going to be looking at more like 20-25% vacancy loss, but you've got a much higher rent at the end of the month. We're looking at $3,000 versus $1,000, right? Now, there's a little bit more management that comes into that too. So managing a long-term rental, there's a lot of months where I don't hear from my tenants. They pay electronically. I don't have to go. I don't go over there and knock on doors unless somebody's not paying. Um, so if I'm there knocking on the door, there's usually a problem. But so normally, if you've placed good tenants and they're taking care of the place and all that kind of stuff, most months it's pretty low maintenance to manage your own stuff. Now, in a short-term rental, it's like managing a hotel, because every time, let's say you come to town and you're going to stay in one of my Airbnbs, you come in, you get there on Friday, you're going to leave on Sunday. Well, I got to clean the place up. I got to restock the fridge. I got to restock the soaps and the shampoos and the towels. I got to do the laundry. All that kind of stuff has to be done before you can rent it up again. So there's a cost involved to manage the rental. So as long as you've got a management company that can do it, or if you're local and you just understand that you're going to be the one doing that, you just have to factor that in. So yes, you're going to make significantly more money, but there's a higher management associated as well.
That's a good point. I actually interviewed a young lady here in Houston. She has an Airbnb management service where she'll go in and pretty much take care of the property and all that type of stuff in between guests.
Do you know what they were charging? Like, did they do a percentage, or was it a per time fee?
I want to say it's a flat rate. I don't think it's a percentage. Okay. But and I'll send you that interview. But what I liked about her is just seeing that market gap. Here we have Airbnb that's booming, but then it's like, who's going to go in and clean?
No doubt.
And I was like, oh, you're a smart woman.
Yeah, there is. Well, and anybody that's starting up a business, it's just find a gap and fill it, and that's a big one for sure, because they can be incredibly lucrative. But here's the thing, and this is what I always tell everybody, because with all the HGTV shows of everybody's flipping houses on TV, right? And so I get all kinds of calls, and people call me up and they go, or I get messages on Facebook, and people will say, hey, could I talk to you about real estate investing? I'm like, sure. And I give them the link to get on my calendar and all that kind of stuff. And then I get on the phone with them. I'm like, well, what are you interested in? Well, I really want to flip houses. I'm like, you've been watching a lot of TV, haven't you? And the thing is, and I always say that because the people that have been in the flipping business for a long time don't like it. I mean, now don't get me wrong. I know I have some friends in my network who own companies that flip lots of homes, but they're not the ones doing it. They're the business owner. They've got a team of people out there doing all of the parts and pieces of it. But when you're starting out, when you're new, the first house we flipped, I mean, that wasn't one we actually lived in. I did it myself. So I was there, with the hammer and the paintbrush and doing all that kind of stuff. And pretty quickly you're like, man, this stinks. It's a job. And that's what I tell everybody. If you're looking to replace your job with a new job and you think you would enjoy the manual labor involved in flipping homes, by all means, have at it, right? But a lot of people think you can make a lot of money flipping houses, which you can, but there's a lot of risk involved too. You can lose a lot of money flipping houses too. I've done that too. And if you don't have a team and you're going to do it yourself, it is a job. Whereas the beauty of owning rentals is it's way more passive. But then again, when you get into the Airbnb stuff, now it goes from being more passive to more active, unless you've got a property manager that's going to take care of it for you. And so the beauty, in my opinion, of doing rental real estate is the passive investment, or the relatively passive investment that comes from being the owner, not necessarily the manager. And as long as you've got that management element figured out with the short-term rentals, you can be very successful. I know people that do it remotely, that have a management that they trust, that they really like, and it works really, really well for them.
Well, I mean, it's a business. I mean, you have to put in that upfront work, energy, create some systems, processes, trial and error, and then hopefully after 1, 2, or 3 houses, it's like, okay, I got it going. I think I got some of it figured out. And then the third and the fourth house becomes a little bit smoother and smoother. One thing I did want to ask you that usually I feel like gets neglected, because I've always been in and out of studying real estate, because I used to be a loan officer around 2006, 2007, but I just haven't actively pursued it. Is background checks, right? So you said something about, if I'm knocking on your door, we have a problem. So I think that's another concern. It's like, man, how do I, get a good tenant? Because I do want to create this passive income, even if it's $1,000, $1,500 a month, but I want as little headache as possible. So what are some of those things we can minimize when it comes to the tenant aspect?
Right. Well, again, you have to check the landlord-tenant laws in every state because they're all different. But what we typically recommend people do is three things. You want to do a credit check, and I'll tell you why, but because it's different than what you might think. We want to do an eviction check because that is public record, and the good eviction check services will let you know if a tenant's ever been evicted before. And then you also want to do a criminal background check. And now, again, every state's different for tenant-landlord law. So you really have to understand what you can deny somebody for. In Ohio, where I'm at, it's a very landlord-friendly state here, it's nice to own rentals here because, the law favors us as the property owner. But in some states, you can't deny somebody because they had a felony. You can't deny somebody because they went to jail for a violent crime. Whereas, here, if somebody has a history of violent crime, like I don't want them as a tenant, right? Because if there's an issue, I got to go over there. If I'm the one managing the property, well, I don't want somebody who I know has a history of violent crime. Like that's just a bad situation. Not saying, whether I'm tough enough to handle it or anything like that. It's not even the case. It's just a factor of, a lot of conflict is best just avoided. So if I can eliminate it, then it works out well. So you have to check to see what you can and can't deny somebody for. But we like to do a criminal check. We like to do an eviction check for obvious reasons. But the main, really the thing with an eviction is it's not as bad as people think from a landlord standpoint. Again, every state's different. Like evicting somebody in New York State, evicting somebody in California is a long, painful process. But like here, it's not that big of a deal. It doesn't hurt tenants as bad as they think it will. And once they've gone through the process and they realize like, oh, that wasn't as bad as I thought. Now it's kind of like what people say with divorce, right? So like the divorce rate's 50%. Well, the divorce rate of people who have already gone through a divorce is significantly higher because they've already gone through that pain. They know what it is. So they're a little bit desensitized to it. And so when it comes to doing it again, it's like, well, I've already done it before. I know what it's all about. So there's the fear of the unknown's gone. So from a tenant standpoint, if they've been through it, they're going to be more likely just to be like, well, I've done this before. It's not a big deal. And the other thing too is once they've gone through it, they can kind of learn how to game the system a little bit. And if you get a tenant who understands the tenant landlord law in your area, they can start to game the system. And it can do some significant financial damage to a property owner if you've got a tenant who is trying to work the eviction court system. So we tell people, hey, if you've been evicted, we're not interested because the mindset kind of shifts. And then from a credit standpoint, obviously you're not trying to buy a house. So you're not trying, we're not looking for somebody who's got a 700 credit score. We really don't care about the score at all. But what we want to see is the stuff that you didn't tell us on the application about. Like what we usually do is anywhere from 2 to 3 times the monthly rent in verifiable income. So if it's $1,000 a month for rent, we want to see at least $2,000, probably $3,000 a month in pay stubs. But when we ask you like, what's your debt? What do you owe on things? Everybody lies. And so, or they forgot, quote unquote, I forgot my car payment's $1,200. I forgot I owe $1,000 a month in child support. I forgot that I was sued 2 years ago and I have a $2,000 a month judgment. So that all shows up on a credit report. And that's really what we're looking for is oh, by the way, I have a student loan payment that's $1,200 a month, right? So yes, you make $2,000, but your student loan payment's $1,200, so you really only make $800, and the rent's $1,000. So how is this going to work, pal? So those it facilitates those conversations. And the thing is, and I can't stress this enough, because when you become a property owner and you get into a situation where you're trying to place a tenant, and maybe the place is sat on the market for a month, and you've now made a mortgage payment without a tenant, so you've felt that pain. You know what I mean? And so what ends up happening is you get a tenant who comes in and they're like, I really love it, I want to rent it. And you're like, your gut's like, they seem like decent people. Your guard your standard drops a little bit, and you're like, I really need that rent money. And so the thing is, if you don't do those checks and you just kind of go off your gut, you can place a tenant who may not be as financially stable as what they want you to believe. And the thing is, too, if they're not a very stable tenant, they probably have been turned down by other people. And so they're pretty desperate, too. So here you've got this desperate landlord, and you've got this desperate tenant who's now not going to tell you the whole story, and they're going to charm you to death to make it seem like they're really, really good. And the thing is, it can work for a little bit until life happens, right? We all know this. I mean, like the insurance commercial, right? Life happens. When life goes sideways and you've got an unexpected bill, or you've got a medical thing that happens, or you've got a sick kid, or you lose your job for a couple months, or whatever it would be, now all of a sudden it puts that strain on the household financially. And if it was already tight to begin with, just that little bit of nudge can be to the point where somebody has to make a question, answer the question to themselves of, let's play the what bill do I pay this month game. And the reality is, the biggest bill they probably have is their rent. And so when you're looking to eliminate pressure, the easiest thing to say is, okay, the rent's not going to show up on my credit report, right? And let's say they lost a job. So I need my cell phone, because I can't answer the interview calls if I don't have a phone. So I got to pay the phone bill. I can't go to the job interview if I don't have a car. So I got to pay my car payment, because they'll come get my car. They'll shut my phone off and they'll come get my car. I know there's an eviction process. I'm not really familiar with exactly what it is, but let's roll the dice on that one. If I don't pay my rent on time, I can buy myself a little bit of time, because I don't think they can evict me in 2 weeks. And hopefully I've got my stuff turned around to the point where I'm not in the position where, I'm going to lose my house and be down on the street. So you start to play this, like, you gamble with the timing of it. You know what I mean? And it just puts pressure on there. And I've seen it a number of times, both in, medium grade areas all the way up to like really, really nice areas. I mean, I've had to evict tenants in 2 of my like grade A properties, which were homes that I actually used to live in personally. And, the one tenant, when they moved in, he was making like $8,000 a month. He had just gotten a really, really good job in town in management. And then the other one, the guy was making almost $10,000 a month, and, had a family and kids and all that kind of stuff. And both of them went through situations where they lost their job, and they had a really, really hard time finding new employment. And we tried, I tried to be the good guy, and be like, hey, we'll work with you. Can we do payments? Can we, how much time do you need to try to find another job? Because at the end of the day, trying to lease up a vacant unit is a little bit of a pain. Getting a tenant out that doesn't necessarily want to leave can be a little bit of a pain. And so sometimes if you have the reserves to weather the storm a little bit or help them, you think, okay, I'll be the good guy and I'll try to help you out. And the problem is, if it goes on too long, now they're starting to dig a hole that they're never going to get out of. 1 month's now gone, they owe you $1,800. Now the next month they missed the second payment. Now you want to go through the eviction process, and let's say it takes a month or 2 to go through that. At the end, next thing you know, they're in the hole for like $7,000 to you, and they're never going to be able to pay it back. And they're in a situation where they really don't even have a job, so you're going to have a hard time even collecting it through the system. And so, back to the whole thing of when do I treat it like a business? Well, the day you start dealing with other people, what the day other people have the ability to influence your money, that's the day you start running it like a business, unfortunately. And and this is the and this is where the value of having a property manager comes in, because I managed everything we had for a long time. And because I was capable, I didn't have a full-time job anymore. I could do it. And the problem is, like I said, I'm cool. I'm handy. So like something breaks, I can go over and fix it. There's an issue, I can take care of it, things of that nature. But when it comes down to you owe me money and I need to come and get it, well, now like I'm not as nice of a guy anymore. And you have to, there's a line, right? There's a line legally of what you can and can't do as a landlord to collect. And this is where the value of having a PM comes in, because the PM can be a jerk and they're not the owner. And you can kind of play good cop, bad cop there. And so you don't have to deal with it as the owner of the property. And so the little bit of money you're going to pay each month to the property manager is well worth it, in my opinion, for that one time the PM's got to get involved and kind of be the bad guy, to be like, hey, look, because at the end of the day, they work for you, right? And so they're going to collect your money because they're going to get paid and that's their job. And so they could be a jerk to the tenant and be like, look, we're protecting our client, and so this is what we have to do. And the tenant might be like, well, my property manager is a jerk. Well, okay, that's fine. But you haven't had to deal with that. So they shelter you from that. There's so much value in that as a business owner that at the end of the day, it's just I can't stress that enough. When you're looking at, and if this is something that you want to do to try to maybe change your life, or you want to start amassing a big portfolio or things of that nature, you need to really think about running it like a business. And it's all about gaining and maintaining momentum. And anytime you got to deal with a difficult situation, like a tenant landlord situation, it lowers that momentum. And so if somebody else can do that for you, you really can't put a price on that.
This whole interview went in a different direction than I expected, but I'm grateful. I definitely want us to talk about your book, sure. Man on Fire, Lessons from a Perpetual Burnout on Creating Alignment for Success. Can you just give us an overview about your book?
Yeah, for sure. So I wrote the book because I felt like I had gone on this journey in my own personal life that I thought other people could find some value in. So it really is my story. There's some motivational stuff in it. And towards the end, I kind of talk about, if you want to take your life in a different direction, here's some action items you can do. Obviously, there's a call to action to reach out to me. I don't have a program or anything like that I'm selling people. So it's not like, hey, go to my website and pay $3,000 and you can learn how to do blah, blah, blah. That's really not what I'm doing. I mentioned that I did an engineering degree, and while I was in school, I felt like I was on this trajectory to really kind of like take over the world. That's just how I'm ambitious, and I gained a lot of momentum in college because when I was in this fraternity, we had this bright idea that, okay, I'm going to join a couple of things on campus, and then you're going to join a couple of things on campus. And if we get every guy in the fraternity to join a couple of things, and then we systematically work our way up into the executive group, like if you're the president of something and I'm the president of something else, when it comes to making decisions, you and I can get together on the side and be like, hey, what do we want to do? And so what we ended up doing was we enacted this thought process, and we really systematically kind of took over the school. It was really cool. I mean, we planned homecoming. It was like, what do we want to do for homecoming? And it was like, well, these 3 student organizations plan everything with homecoming. Well, at the end of the day, we all sat around, on a Friday night, and we were like, what do we want the homecoming theme to be? It was like, well, we really want to do this. And then when those 3 organizations met, it was like, hey, what do you think about this? And everyone was like, oh, that's a good idea. And at the end of the day, we got to do everything that we wanted to do and controlled it. We ran it. We were in charge of a couple of the biggest honor societies. We were in charge of homecoming. We were in charge of student government. We had the president and vice president of student government. We ran the fraternity and sorority council. There was just all kinds of stuff that we controlled. And so there's a ton of momentum in that, right? And there's a ton of power in that. And so when I'm here as a 19, 20, 21-year-old kid, it was like, man, this is cool. It feeds your ego. And you go, I want to keep doing this. And the thing was, when I left school with this thought process of like, I want to perpetuate this, I want to keep going, I want to take over the world. And then you become an employee, and pretty quickly you realize, okay, nobody cares what you did in college. Nobody cares what you think. Nobody cares. They're just like, hey, plug in here. This is what we want you to do. This is the job we hired you for. And you're like, well, what if we could do it like this? And they're like, no, we do it like that. So do it the way we want you to do it. And it really, it deflated that balloon and that momentum. And it was like, okay, I'm new. I get it. I'm young. I just got out of school. And so as I started to go down this path of a career, it was like, okay, maybe when I'm this guy instead of where I'm at now, things will be better. And so all I did was just try to get to that next level constantly. And every time I felt burnt out, and I was a little bored with what I was doing, I would go back to school. And because I felt like that would springboard me to the next level. And after a while of just like feeling like I'm spinning my wheels and never really kind of fitting in, I started to think, maybe I'm never gonna do the things that I thought I was gonna do. And one day, I kind of like, I woke up and when I was 30, I was diagnosed with cancer, and that changed my life. At the time, it was incredibly scary. I woke up, I was married, I had 2 kids. I was in this toxic work environment with this horrible company. I wasn't in a very good marriage. I wasn't a good dad. It was just, and all of this kind of hit me like a ton of bricks when you're facing the thought process that when I go in for surgery, I might not wake up, right? It's scary. And at the time, like I said, it was the worst thing that happened to me. But looking back on it, it was almost like the best thing ever because I was able to hit the reset button, right? But so anyway, in a nutshell, what I ultimately figured out is that I'm a horrible employee, and I really need to be the boss of not only my own life, but also my own destiny. And so was forced into a corner in a position in industry, and eventually was just like, you know what, I'm going to do my own thing. And it's kind of that story, and how other people can do it too. And I think it speaks to a lot of people, especially what I would say is educated, middle class, Americans, because there's this middle class trap that our society has created. And I did not grow up in we didn't have a ton of money when I was a kid growing up, but my parents were both college educated, and we lived, a comfortable life and that kind of thing. So I never grew up in, a bad, rough area. For all intents and purposes, I'm a well-off, somewhat privileged white kid, right? And so from that standpoint, I can't sit here and say, I know what it's like to live in a project in a bad area. I don't. But what I do know is from a mentality standpoint, if I don't owe anybody anything, I'm way more free than what we do to middle class America. And it doesn't matter, man, woman, white, black, Asian, it doesn't make a difference. We force the middle class, it's like sheep through the college front doors of saying, if you want a future, if you want to live the quote unquote American dream, you need to go to college, you need to get good grades so you can get a good job, so you can get married, you can have some kids, you can buy a house, you can have a dog, all the stuff that goes with, the American dream and the apple pie and all that kind of stuff. The problem is you get out of school and you are up to your eyeballs in debt and student loans. You go out and you get more debt. I had a buddy who was just talking to me about how they called off their wedding. They didn't know how they were going to pay for it. And there was some other things going on in the relationship. And at the end of the day, I'm sure they're going to look back on it and be like, hey, it's good we didn't get married. But the thing was, they were trying to go get loans to pay for a party, right? Because it really, at the end of the day, that's what a wedding is, right? You throw a party for yourself. And you sit there and they go, this is what we think is good. This is what we think is okay. So we go out, we get a ton of student loans. A lot of people amass these massive amounts of student loans and then can't even get a job in their field that they got the degree in the first place. But even if you can get a job in your field, my student loans, I mean, I'll just perfectly honest and transparent. At this point, I got 3 degrees, right? I've got over 6 figures in student loans. I mean, if you're not in a situation to make a pretty obscene amount of money, good luck paying that off. I mean, we now allow people to pay off their student loans over a 40-year payback. When I called up and I was like, hey, I don't know if I can afford $1,500 a month. They said, well, we can change your payback period to 40 years. I'm like, you can't even get a mortgage for 40 years to buy a house. Yet we're going to go and let you leverage your student loan debt and basically borrow it forever. The crazy thing is, too, there's no way to eliminate student loan debt. You can file bankruptcy. That student loan debt stays with you. The only way to get rid of student loan debt is to die. That's it. You got to die. And so I'm sure there's a lot of people that are in a situation where they go, man, can I fake my own death? Like, how do I get out from underneath this burden? Like, this is ridiculous. But what we've done is, by the time you wake up and you realize that, oh my gosh, I've got a ton of student loans. I've got a wedding debt that I've paid for. I've got a mortgage. I've got a couple car payments. I've got kids and maybe you've got some medical bills and things like that. You wake up so incredibly indebted, you can't quit your job. Even if you hate it, even if you're treated unbelievably poorly, you can't quit because you can't afford it. And that was the situation I was in. Was I hated my job in construction. I hated where I was. I hated what I was doing. I was good at it, but I didn't like what I was doing. And at the end of the day, I couldn't do anything different because I couldn't afford to do anything else. If I was going to go switch careers, I wouldn't make enough money to be able to pay the bills that I had to pay every month. So I was stuck. I could go from one company to another, basically a lateral move doing the same thing, but I couldn't switch careers. I couldn't switch fields without doing some major surgery on my finances and my living situation and things like that. And when you're in the middle of it, you have this, it's almost like this, it's a paralyzing mindset that, well, I can't move. I can't downsize my house. I can't give the cars back. I can't, you do the things. I mean, those are painful decisions to make, but we create this trap and we all end up in it. And when you realize that I want to do something different, I want to do more, I want to do better, and reality TV is great. Like we all watch the Kardashians and we watch Housewives of whatever county now is out. And we watch that and we go, what the hell do these people do? Like, how do they make all this money? And I would sit and I would I live in, I'm in Cleveland and I live on the west side, and right on the main street close to my house, there's a Mercedes dealer. Next to that's Porsche dealer. Next to that's Maserati. Next to that's Aston Martin. Next to that's Rolls Royce. So they get more expensive and they start with the Benz, right? Which is expensive to begin with. And I would drive past that when I was working in industry, and I would drive past that and I would be like, who the hell can afford these cars? And we live in Cleveland, Ohio. The average household income in Cleveland, Ohio is $26,000 a year. That's the household income. That's basically 2 people making minimum wage. And I sit there and I go, and we think we're going to sell a damn Rolls Royce to somebody. But the thing is, they're open. So if somebody's buying them, what do those people do? And the thing that I realized once I became a business owner and I started to have some success and I started to network with other people that were business owners was like, oh, that's who's buying these things. I've got, I went from, and it's a perspective shift, right? So I went from being a person who would drive past that car dealership and be like, nobody can afford these damn cars, to I think I've got 4 or 5 friends that have Rolls Royces. I don't have one. I I just, my business isn't to the point where I could even consider making a purchase of that size. It's just, and I don't know that I ever will. I mean, it's a lot of money to spend on a vehicle, but I've ridden in them. I've got friends that own them, and you go, oh, well, these are normal people, right? And that was the mindset shift for me, was these are normal people. You hang out with them, and if you didn't know, you'd never suspect the fact that they're successful, they make a lot of money, and they can live that kind of a lifestyle. And the difference is, I think a big part of it's mindset, is that shift that happens when you realize that, damn, well, that guy's no different than me. Well, why can't I do it? But the other thing that comes too is we find ourselves in this situation where we're almost so paralyzed because we've allowed ourselves to kind of fall into this trap. And it's like, well, now, what do I do? And if you're in that situation, you don't have anybody that's ever gotten out of it, right? What you think is, I'm sitting at the bottom of this hole. I look up and the exit to this hole that I've dug for myself looks like a pin, there's a teeny tiny spot, and that's the light all the way at the end. And you go, man, how am I ever going to get out of this? The minute you meet somebody that's done it, now all of a sudden the lights are turned on, there's a ladder. You just didn't see it. It was there. You weren't aware of it, right? And all that happened is somebody now is sitting here going, hey, I've done this. It's not that bad. Here's what you do. And, sometimes it's difficult decisions. Sometimes it's, difficult choices. But at the end of the day, it's not as insurmountable as everybody thinks it is. And, and if I can do it, everybody else can do it.
And how do you define a closet entrepreneur? I'm curious about that.
A closet entrepreneur? That's an interesting question, but I think that anybody that would sit here and think to themselves that they're not satisfied being an employee, that thinks that there's something wrong with them because they're not satisfied, is probably a closet entrepreneur. That they're probably an entrepreneur that doesn't even realize it yet. Like, I know people that, my friend Ryan Stuman is somebody who started working at a car wash when he was 13 years old as a salesperson slinging car washes. He's always been a salesperson. He's always been a hustler. That's just always been his thing, right?
Great energy. Great guy.
Yeah. And I came from a completely different path. I'm a good salesperson, but I was selling a completely different thing, right? And so, and not saying that you got to be a salesperson to be an entrepreneur, but I think that kind of inherently goes with it, because at the end of the day, if you're not selling, you're not bringing any money in the door. And so if you're an entrepreneur that isn't a good salesperson, then that needs to be one of like your first key hires. Just go hire somebody that can sell. But closet entrepreneur, it definitely would be somebody who knows deep down that their life hasn't reached its potential, that they're never going to be satisfied with being an employer working for somebody else. And, and almost feeling like you're out of place by being in that employment setting. The square peg in a round hole feeling, that no matter where you go, you're just like, man, I'm weird and I don't fit in here. One of my mentors is Alex Sharfin. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but Alex wrote a book called The Entrepreneurial Personality Type, EPT. There's a Facebook group called The Entrepreneurial Personality Type. So anybody that's listening that's interested, or that this message kind of speaks to you. And the whole concept is, when I first heard that message, I actually teared up, because I was like, I'm not alone. I'm not the only weird dude that is out there who thinks that there's something wrong with me because I don't assimilate into this be a good employee thought process, right? So I felt like I was broken. And the reality was, I'm not broken. There's a tribe of people out there that get it. They're the entrepreneurs. And it's hard because, right now, if you had called yourself an entrepreneur 10 years ago, people would be like, that's just a fancy word for being broke, right? They're like, you just want everybody to think you're fancy. And the fact of the matter is that you're broke and you don't have a job. Yeah, you're employed. You can't get a job. So you just call yourself an entrepreneur. And it was like calling yourself an artist, right? With the advent of the internet and guys like Gary Vaynerchuk and Grant Cardone and even Ryan and those kind of people, it's cool to be an entrepreneur. It's like the du jour thing right now. So to be able to call, instead of being like, well, I'm unemployed and I'm in between things and I really haven't found something that speaks to me, you can be like, well, I'm the founder and CEO of nextbillionaiремillennial.com. And everyone's like, whoa, did you hear?
And I upload Instagram pictures all day.
Whatever it is. And I'm going to, yeah, exactly. And I'm going to go to my dad and I'm going to be like, hey, Dad, let me borrow 50 G's out of the bank account. And I'm going to take some pictures of it. And then I'll give it back to you and you can put it back in your bank account. And we're joking about it. We're laughing about it. But that stuff's really happening. And, or I'm going to go down to the Rolls Royce dealer and I'm going to take some pictures like this afternoon. And maybe I'll even do it just for fun. We'll go down to the dealer. I'll wear my T-shirt that I got on right now, and I'll take a picture in front of a Phantom with the, hey, what's up? And I'll lead everybody to believe that, I'm either thinking about buying it or I'm capable of buying it or that maybe I've actually just closed on it. When the reality is, no, I just stopped on the way home and snapped a picture from my Instagram page.
And I see it. Oh, I see it.
At Dr. Matt Motil, man, he's doing really, really well. He just snapped a picture on Instagram in front of a Rolls Royce Phantom. And everyone's going to be like, man, that guy's awesome. I
want to work with him.
Yeah, exactly. But and there's, there's that phrase, right? Fake it till you make it. And I used to say that all the time. I was like, we got to fake it till you make it. And the reality is, no, because here's the thing. When people realize that you're faking it, you lose all credibility, right? And I would never want somebody to believe that I'm driving around, tooling around in a Phantom, because if you ever come to town and we get together and you come to my house, you're going to be like, dude, you don't have a Phantom. You don't even have a 3-car garage to like park a Phantom. And, or when I pick you up from the airport and you're like, hey, where's the Phantom? I'm like, I sold it, man. I didn't like it. That thing was bougie. I didn't like it. It was too big. It didn't fit in my garage. And I was joking the other day because my wife's like, well, what, because we're to the point, we've got so many kids now that like they don't all fit in a sedan. And so we need to get a car. We need to get like an SUV or something. We refuse to do the minivan thing. It's just our personal preference. Even though minivan, mega fun, it's just not the case. But so we'll get an SUV. And so we're like thinking about what we want to get. And I'm like, well, what we do is whoever's got the kids drives the kid car, the car with the kids seats in it. And then the other one drives the other car. And we got 2 sedans right now. So I was like, the other car, this is like me politicking for, like a sports car or something. I'm like, whoever's driving the kids around has got the big car. And then we could go get something that's a little bit more fun. And then, the days like you're going to work and I got the kids, like, you could drive the fun car. And she's like, man, I don't care about that. And I'm like, yeah, but I do. Like, can we go get something fun? And she's like, what do you want? I'm like, I want a Ferrari. And she's like,
no way.
And the thing is, that car would be more than what my house is, right? Like I'm in Cleveland. So I have a nice house. It's a big house. It's in a good area, great schools, low crime, all that kind of stuff. And it's probably worth $250. But we don't, that's what we always lived in. We lived in that when I had a normal job and I was making a decent salary. And so we just, moving sucks. So we've never moved. And I go, I can't park a $300,000 Ferrari in a house that's $250,000. We used to see that all the time in Phoenix. You'd go into the rough parts of town in Phoenix and you'd see this house that was maybe 60 grand and the garage door, because we were doing construction down these streets, we were building the light rail, and you'd see this like shack of a house. It'd have a 1-car garage. The garage door would like roll up and here's this like $100,000 Escalade with like rims tinted out and like all blinked up. And you're like, is this for real? Like that car's twice the value of that house. It just seems so strange. And, and at the same time too, like at the end of the day, I have all these kids, they don't care. Right. So like I'd be sitting here being like, this is daddy's Ferrari. Don't go near it. Don't breathe on it. Don't look at it. And they'd be like, I wrote, I love you, daddy, with a rock on the side. That's what kids do. And you got to put it in perspective, right? Like, we're not in a position to do something like that. So I don't want to front that that's something that I would even want to do. Because at the end of the day, even when we get to the point where it's like, okay, this maybe makes sense. It's like, I have throwaway furniture in the house because it's like my kids that are home every day with us are 5.5, 2.5, and 9 months old. I could go buy a $7,000 like full grain leather couch, something that I would really want to own. And I'd come home tomorrow and they'd be like Sharpie all over it because that's what kids do, right? And it's like you gotta be realistic, even if you have the ability to not be. So we're kind of going on a tangent here, but I think it's good. Good conversation.
No, but it's what I like to call entrepreneurial truths. Just the real deal behind it. And I mean, I see it all the time. I see, just randomly driving down the street on the highway. Sundays, car dealerships are closed, but people are stepping in. And you're not taking a picture of the car, you're taking a selfie of the car. What's going on?
Leveling up.
Like, is this what you do?
Hashtag level up, And it's like, no, it's not. The car dealer's closed. And what you're going to do is you're not going to post that on Instagram today because everyone's going to be like, man, that dealership's closed today. They're going to wait and they'll post it on like Tuesday. And they'll post it at like 10 a.m. where everybody else is working. And so you're bored at work on your phone because you should be working, but you're on Instagram instead. And you'll be like, damn, Matt's at the Ferrari dealership at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday. His life's pretty good. My life sucks because I'm sitting here at work. I mean,
that video they recorded on Sunday, they saved it in their phone so they can upload it onto.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's all about, it's content creation and distribution, right? And you, as an entrepreneur, you have to be aware of that because, you could do, like I have a podcast, right? The Cash Flow King, and it's on iTunes and stuff. It comes out Fridays at Friday morning. We launch it at like, I don't know, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning Eastern time on Fridays. Well, we're not recording that thing at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning on Fridays, right? Like we record it on Tuesday or Wednesday and then we edit it. And then, and if it sucks, then we redo it and all that kind of stuff. But people are like, oh yeah, it comes out on Fridays. Well, yeah, because that's what we distribute. That's the distribution of it, and we didn't do it on Thursdays because there's a bunch of like other podcasts that I know some of our listeners listen to on Thursdays. And I'm like, like ours is just going to get kind of pushed down on the queue. So I'm like, well, maybe they work through those on Thursday and then Friday they'll be like, all right, I got time for a free podcast. So let me do that one on Friday. So it just kind of makes sense.
I get it.
But yeah.
No, I appreciate it. Matt, where can people find you at?
The best thing, I'm on social media. My Instagram and my Twitter is both drmattmotil.com or drmattmotil. I'm on Facebook. I'm very active on Facebook. But the easiest thing is to go to my website, drmattmotil.com. You can get a free copy of my book from the website. You can access the podcast from there. There's lots of really good resources in terms of if you want to get into real estate investing, you're not really sure how to start. I've got a blog there where we talk about a lot of good stuff. There's also the ultimate guide to remote real estate investing is available on there. It's free, which is, if you live in a market that's expensive, where it doesn't make sense to invest in your market, you can invest in a different market, right? So you can invest in Cleveland or you can invest in Indianapolis or Memphis or wherever it would be. You just have to have the tools, right? It's the same thing with whether you're going to do Airbnb or if you're going to do long-term rental. As long as you've got the tools and the resources, you can be successful. And what our company really does is we provide this like turnkey operation for somebody who would want to invest with the really nice returns we have here in our markets from wherever they would be. But whether you want to use us or you want to use somebody else, get our guides so that you can know, here's the things, because a lot of times it's not a function of being savvy enough. It's just, I don't even know what I don't know. And so we kind of put this together to say, hey, we're not saying we're the best. I think we are, but at the end of the day, you want to go with somebody else. At least here's the questions you should ask. Here's the things you should be looking for to be successful remotely. So that, because there's nothing worse than at the end of the day, hearing somebody say, "Oh, I tried rentals and it didn't work, and so I don't think it's for me." All that means is that you didn't have the right tools in the tool belt to be successful, and now you've gotten turned off by it. And the problem is that there's a lot of money involved when you get into real estate, right? It's not a cheap thing. It's not like I'm starting an MLM and I had to pay $100 for my business opportunity kind of a thing. You're shelling out thousands or tens of thousands of dollars to get in the game. And so if you get burned by somebody, and there's a lot of people out there that are doing that, it can turn you off in a hurry, and you can develop this really bad, taste in your mouth about the fact that it's like, well, rentals is a scam or it sucks and things of that nature. So at the end of the day, I want to help people do exactly what I did, which was leverage real estate to be able to quit my job and do what I want to do and live the life I want to live. And so if somebody hears that message and they're like, "Man, I'd love to do that too," I want to help them. Like I said, I don't have a program to sell. I just want to help you get into rentals so that you can do what you want to do. And so we're willing to help people get to that, be able to bridge that gap, go from where you are today to where you want to be, and help everybody be successful. And if I help everybody win, then I win too. So
I love it. Yeah. And I appreciate you because, like I said, especially here in Houston, I know people that have spent hundreds and thousands of dollars on real estate classes or programs, and you have one of the best laid out blogs, which is free information on just how to get started. And it's so important to inform and educate yourself on this process. And I learned like this 203K loan. I'm actually blown away by that because that's one thing I've never, ever, ever, ever heard of. And I'm pretty sure I have a friend right now who's listening. Yes, I'm talking about you. That's paying thousands of dollars taking real estate investing classes. And thank you.
It hurts me, like emotionally, when I hear somebody say, "Well, I spent $30,000 on this," or "I spent $40,000 on that," because there are programs out there that will charge you that kind of fees. And then when I ask them, I'm like, "Well, what did you do with that? Like, what are you doing?" And they go, "Well, I'm still waiting to do my first deal." And I'm like, "Damn it. For $40,000, I could sell you a house."
Yeah.
Like, I can help you get into a house that's completely managed with a tenant that's all now cash flowing, and you'd be making money. And then here's the really cool thing, and not for 40,000 because I think the loan amounts, the minimum's 50, but I've got a lender right now that if the loan is at least 50 grand, can get an investor their money back within 30 days if the property's got the equity in it. So one thing that we really try to do with all of the deals that we put together is we're going to try to get it to you for 75% or less of current market value. So there's already equity in it from day one. So we get really, really good deals, and we can pass on really, really good deals to you. So that being said, let's say the house is worth 100 grand, you buy it for 60. You can come in, it's going to appraise for 100. So there's the equity in it. So the bank will give you the loan for 60. And what will end up happening is within 3 to 4 weeks, you can get your $60,000 back, which does a couple things. One, if you want, you can take that 60 and you go buy another one, and then you can do it again. You can take it back and go buy another one. That's what we've got a lot of people doing. We just helped the guy do this for the 4th time in like 5 months. And so when you think about stacking units and things of that nature, if you could add 10 units in the next 12 months, and each unit, after all of your expenses and reserves and mortgage payments and all that kind of stuff, was making, let's say, for conservative math, $200 a unit, you'd be at $2,000 in passive income a year from now. That's a game changer. I mean, what would you do with an extra 2 G's a month? That's a big deal. You could lease any car you want with that money.
Well, we did talk about those student loans earlier. So,
well, that's the thing too. I mean, you could do some major damage a year in paying that off. That could pay your student loan bills. But let's say you've gotten to the point where you've paid off things. Your credit cards are gone, your student loans are gone. You could lease a hot rod for that kind of money. You could go on vacation a couple times a year. It's a total game changer. And the reality is that it's completely passive. the beauty of cash flow is it's not a job. It's an investment that's coming back to you, and you literally can get paid from anywhere. The last couple of years, we've done a cruise with the family, and we've done it over my birthday. And so we've traveled across the first of the month. And so last year on the first, I think we were in St. Lucia, and I've actually, that's the t-shirt I'm wearing right now is my St. Lucia shirt. But the year before that, we were in Jamaica on the first. And so the cool thing is I'm on vacation with my family in a different country, and all my tenants paid. And so we got paid while we were on vacation with not having to actually put in any effort. The property managers were doing what they do. The tenants were doing what they do. The properties were doing what they're supposed to do. And I'm enjoying my time on vacation with my family in a different country, and we're getting paid. Like that, in my opinion, is the new American dream.
I love it. Love it. Once again, Matt, thank you. Everyone, please be sure to check Matt out at his website, drmattmotil.com. I will have that in the show notes, as well as his book, Man on Fire. Remember, I believe in you. A personal connection leads to an influential network. So thanks for networking with Michelle.